Hello again. I can't resist another part from Demelza, so I'm going to read from chapter 8. And which book is it? Which book? I think it must be book 2. Yes, book 2, and it's in chapter 8. So, sorry about the glare. The glare's getting me down this evening. I can't seem to be rid of it. It's a bit better if I sort of stay like that. Dear, oh dear. Oh yes. Sanson had said when they met at the door, "I have been looking to the opportunity to play you a game, Captain Poldark. A good card player is very rare, and it is a pleasure to sit with such an expert one." "Thank you. I've no taste for gaming tonight," Ross had said. "I find that most disappointing, Captain Poldark. Last time you were very successful at my expense, and I had looked forward to the opportunity of levelling our scores. Most disappointing." He said this in a deliberate voice. "I'm here to escort my wife. That being so, it wouldn't fill my purpose to spend the evening in the card room. Which is your wife?" "I would like the pleasure." Ross looked about, but Demelza had been surrounded. "Over there." "She seems well attended, if I might say so. Might I suggest a short game, just while the evening is warming up?" Ross caught sight of Mrs. Teague in an astonishing dress of light green and gold gauze, with green foil leaves and gold spangles. With her was Elizabeth's mother, Mrs. Chenoweth, whom he detested. At that moment George Warleggan arrived with Francis and Elizabeth. "Ah, Sanson," he said, "there'll be no pleasure dancing in this crush. Have you got a table?" "I have seats saved, but they will be gone if we don't hurry. I was prevailing on Captain Poldark to join us." "Come along," said George. "With Francis we can make a foursome." "Captain Poldark has not the taste for it tonight," Sanson said. "I am 60 guineas out, and had hoped to recoup myself." "Or go 60 guineas outer," suggested George. "Come, Ross, you can't refuse the dear fellow his fair revenge. Francis is eager to start. Don't spoil the game." There were too many people here, people of the kind who had sent Jim to prison, painted and powdered up, dressed to the eyes, high-heeled, fan-flicking, snuff-box clicking, people with titles, people wanting titles, place-holders, place-seekers, squires, squireens, clergymen with 2 or 3 rich livings, brewers, millers, iron, tin and copper merchants, ship-owners, bankers, people of his own class, people he despised. He turned. "What do you want? What do you wish to play?" "Where is Francis?" said Mrs. Chenoweth, asking peevishly a few minutes later. "The dancing has begun, and you are not dancing, Elizabeth. It's not good enough, really it's not. He might be here at least to commence with his wife, if nothing more. It will make more talk. Go and see where he is, Jonathan." "Yes, my pet." "Do sit down, father," Elizabeth said. "Francis is in the gaming room with Ross and George. I saw them enter. He will not come back for you. Leave him for a little." "It's not good enough. Really, it's not good enough. And if Francis was not coming, why did you refuse that Dr. Ennis and those other gentlemen? You are too young to spend your evenings sitting by the wall. The first gathering you have permitted yourself in so many years, and then to squander the time." Mrs. Chenoweth fanned herself vigorously to show her frustrations. The last years had changed her cruelly, and at Elizabeth's wedding she had been a beautiful woman, but her illness and the doctor's treatment had distorted the eye, of which she had lost the sight, and her face was swollen and drawn. She was a deeply disappointed woman too, for Elizabeth's marriage, of which she had hoped so much, had gone just the same way as her own, or even worse, for Jonathan had never dared to get his name linked with another woman. He had only lost money irritatingly and steadily for the last 26 years. "Elizabeth," said George Warleggan, coming on them suddenly, "grant me the favour of the second dance." She looked up and smiled at him. "I promised you the first, but you were busy with your gaming." "No, I was seeing the others settled. I had no thought but to be in time. Mrs. Chenoweth," he hunched his big shoulders and bowed, "how charming you look tonight. You only do wrong to sit beside Elizabeth, whose beauty has no match. I swear her seat will be occupied the moment I take her away." Mrs. Chenoweth bridled like a girl at her first compliment, and when people began forming up and Elizabeth had left them, she sighed. "Oh, shame, a wicked shame, Jonathan. What, my pet, that Elizabeth should have thrown herself away on one of the Poldarks. We were too hasty. What a supremely good match she would have made with George." "A bit of an upstart, what?" said Jonathan, stroking his silky beard. "No class about him, you know." "Blood is overrated," said his wife impatiently. She was tempted to say she had made the mistake of marrying it. "It takes but a generation to make a class, Jonathan. Times have changed. Wealth is what counts." The dance began. Demelza was recovering her confidence, but her throat was parched. "A clergyman?" she said in a puzzled voice, looking at her partner's double-breasted cut-away coat, canary-embroidered waistcoat, brown silk breeches and striped stockings. "No, I would not have guessed it." The newly ordained vicar of St. Trudy and St. Wren squeezed her hand. "Why not? Why not?" "The one I know at Gramblow wears a patch suit and a straw wig." "Oh, pooh! No doubt some poor little clerk doing duty for his master." "What are you?" she asked. "A bishop?" Whitworth bowed low. "No, mem, not yet. But with your encouragement, mem, I soon would be." "I didn't know clergymen danced," she said. "It is an accomplishment some of us have, mem." "Like bears?" she suggested, looking at him. Whitworth broke into a low laugh. "Yes, mem, and we can hug too." "Oh, I'm that frightened." She bowed to him with a little pretended shiver. The young man's eyes kindled. He could hardly wait until they came together again to continue. George and Elizabeth had been dancing in well-mannered silence. Then George said, "Elizabeth, you ravish me in that gown. I sigh to be a poet or a painter. There's such purity of colour, such beauty of line." She smiled up at him more warmly than she had ever done before. She had been thinking of Geoffrey Charles at home at Trenwith, without her protective care, but George's words recalled her. "Really, George, you're too kind, but I should take your compliments more seriously if you were less free with them." "Free, my dear? I am never free with my compliments. With whom have I ever been free except with you, whom I admire and reverence?" "Sincere, then," she said. "Is it sincere to praise my poor mother?" He glanced at the couple by the wall. No one had come to occupy Elizabeth's seat. "No, I confess it is not. But I have the respect for her that I would naturally have for your mother, and I sympathize with her in her misfortune. She has been a beauty, remember, or a near beauty, used to the praises of men. How must she feel now, never to know a second glance except perhaps in compassion?" Elizabeth looked quickly up at her partner. It was the most sensitive thing she had ever heard him say. "You're very kind, George," she said quietly. "You always are. I'm afraid you have little reward for your attendance on me. I'm a dull creature these days." "My reward is in your friendship and confidence. As for your being a dull creature, how can what is treasured be dull? You are lonely. Agreed. You spend too much of your time at Trenwith. Your child is grown now. You should come more often to Truro. Bring Francis if you Bring Francis to the gaming tables again? It is the only reward for the end of Rambler that he sees less of the green clods and more of his family." George was silent for a moment. He had gone wrong there. "Is Francis good company now that he stays at home?" Elizabeth bit her lip. "I have my house and my child. Geoffrey Charles is not yet 5. He's delicate and still needs watching." "Well, promise at least that this is not an isolated occasion. Come again to stay with me in town or at Cardew. I, in turn, will promise not to encourage Francis at the cards. In fact, I'll undertake never to play with him, if that will please you." "He's playing now, George." "I know, my dear. It was unfortunate. There was no stopping him."